ready?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Hang on. I feel like I'm gonna sneeze. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Altacast number 32. Today we're going to be talking a bit. We're going to be doing a bit more of a general podcast. Needless to say, there's a lot of things we can talk about at Township Tale. Some things really exciting, but a lot of those come further in the future. And so, to kind of pace ourselves and to keep things, we want to talk about those topics when they can be most relevant to you, or at least we try to for a lot of them. I know last week we talked about bosses, but that was kind of a bit of an exception.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking a bit just about VR and video games and stuff like that in general. I think we've never really shared our opinions of those things, and our thoughts and kind of what we want to do with the industry and what excites us about it. So that's what today's about. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Boramy, otherwise known as Boston on Discord, and I'm the lead designer for Township Tale.
And I'm Joel. I'm the lead programmer.
So, yep, and let's get started, I guess. Right,
Sure.
Right into it.
For a bit of context, Township Tale is the first VR project that we worked on. I guess to this scale, we were doing some small demo or prototyping, both a little bit before Township Tale and along the way. We've obviously worked on lots of prototypes and side sorts of things, but Township Tale has been our big focus, and we've been working on it for almost 5 years now. So this is, are you doing the maths for me? You look shocked.
No. So I'm trying to get the audio. I'm trying to make sure that you're loud enough.
Okay, cool. We've been doing VR for basically 5 years now, and I guess along the way we've done a lot of research, we've done a lot of experimentation ourselves, and we've sort of formed a lot of opinions about things, as you tend to when you are thinking about it and dealing with a space for so long. VR is still, it's worth recognizing VR is still very young. In general, we're still at the point where there's things that people know don't exist in VR. For instance, there's no MMO to the scale of World of Warcraft in VR, and there's no you can kind of name PC games. There's no League of Legends sort of game in VR. There's all sorts of these things that people see are missing, and I guess that just goes to show how young VR still is. There's so many voids. So I guess our opinions have developed from this perspective of being in this growing industry and seeing mistakes be made and seeing things go well. So
yeah. So I guess let's go back a bit to the start of things and we'll kind of work through the mindset history, I guess, of VR as an industry and as people playing VR games. So everybody kind of knows roughly how it kicked off, like with the Oculus DK1s. Yeah. Joel had some experience with that early on.
The DK1 was interesting because there was so much hype around it. And personally, I got one for context, but I was severely disappointed. I did a couple roller coaster sims. I played Team Fortress 2 for 6 hours straight in VR, but it kind of it didn't seem like it was enough to warrant attention at the time, and obviously that's a blind blindness of my behalf at the time, because I mean we can see how far it's come and how fast it's accelerated from that point. But yeah, it wasn't until we tried
the DK2.
DK2 and it actually had the head tracking quite well done that really it was like, okay, this is actually a meaningful experience now. It's not like a weird on rails feeling experience. It's actually quite a I don't know, the head tracking was the difference between feeling like I'm just looking at screens, which you pretty much are looking at 360 screens, to being in the world and being part of the world. So,
yeah, it's the first kind of like step towards embodiment of the virtual characters that we are. And I think that really set the tone. And then when motion controllers came about, that's when it really pushed things through.
All the trailers have this, like, the person puts on, I'm blurring. The person puts on the headset and then they look at their hands and do this, and I think for many people who have been in VR for so long, I don't know whether that's even more of a real experience or it looks a bit odd, but it's such a real experience to new VR users. Is like, what the hell? I've got hands and they're tracking, because it's just foreign experience. It just doesn't. It's just not like, you know that's what's going to happen. You're like, you know that it's got controllers that track, but it just is so odd to have this representation that you just do not get in any other medium. So that obviously that was a big step.
I think like the I'm sure that's like a lot of our viewers and everybody in the community who's played the game obviously has played VR. But something that we grasped from that very first moment when we started up with with having hand tracking, and when we started working on something, was always the idea of keeping your hands as your hands. Because to us that was such a key part of the experience of being in VR, was that now you like that you should manipulate with this world, like in this world, with the way that you normally do. And obviously, as a video game, we can take some abstractions in different places, and games do that to different degrees. But I think it's kind of a choice, I guess, that developers make when they're making a VR game. It's to whether or not they're going down this realism route, like we are, and not realism necessarily in the sense of aesthetics, but realism in the sense of experience. Where we don't want people to overly think about or to overly act in ways that don't look like it's super connected to the world.
So we from the start tried to we kind of set ourselves a challenge, and we've tried to hold true to that challenge of pretty much avoiding UI at all costs. And I mean, if you play Township Tale, you'll know where we lie on that spectrum, where pretty much the majority of the game is UI-less, and then in the main menu we have some things to help coordinate friends and stuff. But we've still tried to keep it hand-based, which has had its pros and cons. There's a level of intuition that's both gained and lost by using your hands. Like, you know how to use your hands, but the intuition that's lost is you also know how to use traditional computer user interfaces with a mouse. So we're trying to use this balance of so grabbing something out of a bookshelf dock. You know how to use your hands. Like, yes, it might not be a cursor clicking on an inventory slot, but you know how to reach out and grab something. So in that sense, it's really intuitive. But then there's some other things, like we've got some scroll bars which are rope pulling, which we try and make intuitive, because rope pulling will generally do things like it's a pulley system going on, but it's not what the intuitive scroll bar that you're used to pointing, clicking, and dragging down. So it's been an interesting ride for us in that regard, having these discussions of how do we do something that if we were on mobile or if we were on PC, we wouldn't even be having this discussion, because scroll bars have been done a million times in the past.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like it's interesting that like I'm sure that people thought the same way when computers first came about. Was how do we represent these like concepts? And I guess they were fairly new concepts for computer interfaces in terms of like the existence of a scroll bar. Like we need to fit this theoretically endless content inside of this quad, but we need
yeah,
people to internalize it. Um,
and
and now we're kind of going backwards to trying, or I guess doing a hybrid of what people are used to,
yeah,
interacting with physical space and still having like, because it is a digital game, and like your serverless, for example, they're not all going somewhere like when they're off screen. They're not all getting stored inside of like this insanely large warehouse while you're not looking at the server names.
yeah.
They disappear. So we um, that's
There
that's
needs to
like
be
that's an
some
interesting thing.
structure.
It's kind of like it almost makes things feel like magic a bit, in like the theological sense of the term of like technology being indistinguishable from magic to a degree.
The uh, the interesting thing is if you look at Mac and PC scrolling, for instance, is on Mac, um, you're moving the page as such. So when you scroll down, the page moves down. Whereas on Windows, the name is apt. When you scroll down, your window, your vision on that page is what's moving down. Or reverse, I guess the page is moving up. So your monitor's standing still, obviously, but the page is moving up when you scroll down, as if your viewport is moving down. And then on mobile, swiping was the thing, but that hasn't always been the case. Like when moving from PC to mobile, you can look into this a lot. There's a lot of people who've done papers and stuff on this of how a lot of games have, or a lot of software has, tried to mimic PC, and then people are going, why are you mimicking PC? This isn't a PC. You don't have a mouse. You don't have a keyboard. Like, acting as if you have a mouse and a keyboard is actually holding you back from that platform. And touching and swiping keyboards, for instance, have become a phenomenally popular thing, because fundamentally the only reason we're used to pressing keys one at a time is because that's what we have on a keyboard, and typing extremely fast with swiping is actually now possible. And I guess to us VR was the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's,
yeah. I think we're showing our age a
Let's
bit here
move
with
on.
like the spectrum of technology that we've lived through.
So something that was interesting to me when we first got into VR was, and I think to a lot of people, is this idea of being in VR forever. And I think we'll delve into that a little bit more later with metaverse talking, if we happen to land upon that subject later. But to me, the first question was, can I work in VR? Can I put on my headset, open up code in VR, and do all my programming on my keyboard? Like I'm not going to try and do it with controllers, but on my keyboard, can I have my screens there and do all my work? And pretty quickly with the first sort of generation of Oculus and Vive, we found that wasn't really possible. We still don't do that at all.
Yeah.
We see more and more people using software in VR. So Township Tale, there's a community piece of software called Prefabulator, and I see people popping that up while in VR to use it. But we're still not at that stage, but that's something I'm super excited to reach, is that stage.
Yeah.
So
I know that when I was when we were at the old office, like before we moved, and like it was just you and me, I remember trying with the DK2 virtual desktop when it was just kind of like a in VR screen.
Yeah.
And I was modeling stuff in Maya, like sitting there with my mouse and keyboard, like looking at the screen, and that was pretty cool. And I would love to do that as well, but the like resolution and like headset comfort, I guess, are the two big factors for that.
Yeah.
But I think we're pretty close. Like the like my current room conditions are like my room gets way too warm to be in VR for super long. Like even now that it's cooling down in Sydney, the sun beating down all through my apartment gets pretty intense. But yeah, it's quite a like working in VR is like a future that a lot of people are pursuing. For that 3D space, and I'm curious to see what the level of dexterity some of these apps require to be utilized completely in VR. Because I see a lot of ads for like working in VR, and there's people using controllers, but I don't think controllers are always going to be the best way to use VR, especially for like business and corporate needs.
Wacom's got their 3D stylus that they're working on, which is something I'm sure we'd love to get our hands on one day, but yet to experience. I think so. Yeah, our workflow hasn't shifted into VR. I'd say the main changes between working on PC or mobile titles and VR has been obviously the design space. Like obviously you're going to design a game differently if it's in VR compared to not in VR. It's really weird, the testing cycle, because you're constantly making changes, and then you're putting on a headset, and sometimes you want to just sit in your chair and just roll back and try and do stuff and not hit your head on your desk. And sometimes you got to push your chair and properly hop up and test, and it's quite a different experience. And something I think, I'm not so sure about Boramy, but especially as programmers, a lot of work we do isn't always related to the VR gameplay. So we go through long sessions of development, maybe months, where we don't even need to hop in VR to test what we're working on, because we're working on back-end systems or we're working on something else. And then we go into a phase of working on gameplay again, and suddenly we have to get back into this habit of having this headset dangling here so that I can have it ready, and stuff's not charged and my controllers are on my desk again, and it's just such a drastic shift in kind of workflow and testing.
I know that like when we were working on a lot of interaction systems for Township Tale, when we were physically in the office together, one of us would be in VR and then the other person would be at the computer, kind of like doing stuff in the editor, and then you see like this giant cube just appear and start to like, and then after like adding some components and stuff, then I could like interact with it, and just really interesting. That was quite an interesting experience for working VR, this duality.
That's definitely something different to other experiences for the most part. We still have that a bit where we have someone on the dashboard spawning stuff in, someone's in VR going, hey, can you spawn me a stick, and they're spawning in stuff for them. And we can still do that remote, because obviously the dashboard is on the server, not on the other person's computer. But it is definitely still quite different to some of those initial tests were really, like two people on one computer working together, one in VR, one in and we, so that aspect of the workflow is still is very different. I think, Do you have any points you want to bring up? I have so many points, I can just keep going.
I mean, I think like so we've talked quite a fair amount about the about working in VR, about kind of like our early stuff. I suppose now like we should try to cover a bit about where we think VR is going and what we'd like to see from like the industry develop. Yeah. So obviously there's what we do, which is make like a Township Tale. Our goal with that is to kind of create the most, or a highly embodied VR experience where everything goes that way. But that's like it's quite a hardcore experience, I would say. Like you have to, it's not that the game is overly difficult or anything like that, but it's something that takes a bit more commitment, I suppose, than like being than like your average game. Like it's not like we're not as easy to pick up as Beat Saber, for example.
It's far from arcade. It's definitely a long haul RPG style game. Another one of our kind of goals, which makes, I think, Township Tale, I guess, survive that long-term gameplay a bit better, but also makes it a little bit tougher to get into, is we're really trying to create such a a wide range of experiences that still tie together and create a coherent experience. We don't want to, like, we didn't want a blacksmithing minigame and a mining minigame. We wanted the mining part of the experience to tie into the blacksmithing part, and for that to circle back in. And I think as we see these larger games appear, I think we see more of these kind of large, holistic, tied-in experiences. And that's not to say that's by any means better or than, I guess, the mini-game approach or the arcade approach of many other VR games. I think they're really important, and they've clearly been the main driver. Like, you look at Beat Saber, it's the best-selling VR game, and it's an arcade experience. So by no means am I saying one is better or worse, but that's generally our goal. But there's lots of things, that I would love to see in the rest of the industry. One personally that I think is still hasn't been touched upon to the full capacity that it could is the opposite of what we're doing, which is third-person gameplay. Actually delving into the world of, yes, the obvious thing. We're chasing the really obvious thing, which is put the person in VR and have them enjoy their bodily experience. But I would love to see more developers tackling the reverse of that, which is how can we create engaging third-person experiences in VR. I love kind of hack and slash, roguelike, dungeon crawler sort of games. And the thing with VR is you still get even when you're not possessing a body, you still get a larger sense of being in the world and seeing things. And I think it would be really interesting to have that in a dungeon crawler. I have ideas of how I would do it, but I just think it would be awesome to see more of that sort of thing in VR.
I think for me personally, something that I know has been dabbled in quite a bit, but I've never seen it to the extent that's been able to captivate me like quite immensely, because I play a lot of, and recently more or so, of kind of these resource strategy games. Like I've been playing Anno 1800, City Skylines, and a bit of Prison Architect. Those types of games, like
sounds like Boramy sort of game.
Like I mean, some of the stories that my friends and I make up about like the cities and stuff that we build is always leans towards like the oppressive Prison Architect story.
Even the City Architect is we've hit an all new low with our resident approval ratings. Good work.
But kind of like this quite intensive management game, and like I always wanted to see like the cities and stuff that we build in VR. I see some games kind of take a bit more of like it's always usually a bit more stylized, a little bit smaller scale, less high precision, and I think that kind of pulls back a bit for me the impact of seeing your creation when like what you're building is at a lower unit resolution, I guess, when you're thinking about like the grid space of things. That being said, there are some things. There are some like titles that I think are really hard to translate to VR. Like this kind of RTS game, you don't have the same. You don't really have the same input dexterity as you do on keyboard and mouse. That being said, though, I actually don't use the keyboard that much when I'm playing those strategy games.
No, that's because you suck.
To me, like pressing like I don't know, something about pressing keys to play a strategy game feels wrong.
Please tell me you press keys when you played League of Legends.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
But like, I think that's different because that's like hyper competitive. But like with the pace of those games, like I like being able to kind of lean on my hand, on my hand.
You just want the chillax.
Yeah.
Terrorize citizens sort of vibe.
Yeah, and I think fighting games, especially with like the game sticks, like the game like arcade sticks,
Yeah.
um, and like controller games, like super high precision input. Like you only get kind of this. It's very exterior VR experience. Like it doesn't matter too much the fact that you're in VR for that. It's just about
Yeah.
seeing the visuals.
Yeah.
So that's I think one of the tricky things with those two genres with VR.
Yeah, there's an aspect to where VR it is really only just adding a wider field of view or a bit more ability to look around. But I do think, even from a user interfacing perspective, there can be quite some drastic differences if you've got. And I think that's a big question: is if you're planning to work on a city builder, and you're asking yourself, if I do it in VR, this is the toolbox available to me to play stuff, whereas I'm going to get a lot more precision on PC if I have menus and stuff. It can be very attractive to go for the precision route, but then there's all these kind of I don't know, intricacies and details that you gain in VR.
Yeah.
And I think we found that a lot. One of the first things I remember Boramy doing was, firstly, there's the story that we keep throwing around of how Township Tale started, which was there was just a prop of a hammer and a prop of an anvil, and Boramy pretends to be a blacksmith there. But there's other things like, I remember Boramy looking under tables and stuff, like making a big deal about looking under tables, like nothing under the tables, but or like opening a chest and hopping in the chest and closing it behind him. Like there's just things in VR where you're suddenly these small details of the world. Like if it was any other game, you can't really look under or behind or around things, and the world has kind of less of a immersion aspect simply because of that. And so many VR games make use of this. They have props that you pick up the bottle and you can throw it and smash it. In Half-Life Alyx, people observed that the wine bottles have liquid in them that you can pour around in your hand, and there's chalkboards where you can, or whiteboard markers, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think the whiteboard markers, yeah.
Where you can draw on the windows and stuff, and it's just, in a non-VR game, that would never exist. You just can't, you're not going to have someone program in a full system to have hand controls so you can draw on a window when it has no gameplay benefit. But in VR, they just needed to program in the drawing aspect because the hand movement was free and it was a given to them. Yeah.
There's a really interesting thing with that is that you in games you kind of teach the scope of interaction precision that might be required. So something that we did with the early PAX demo was have people scale down and scale way up, and that kind of like really opened people's minds about what's like possible with VR in terms of like you might turn yourself small and then you can kind of you're much smaller so you can kind of get around more, and then you're huge and then you can see like things do look a little bit like this. You're in this RTS landscape.
This toy set.
It felt a bit like what I imagine like Black and White would feel like if you're one of like the one of the kind of like god creatures that just we were throwing logs at each other a bunch.
Yeah,
like
we throw logs and dodge. And,
we'd have like
small, we'd hide in the mushroom.
Yeah, we'd have one person be small and then someone else would just be chucking logs at them. It'd just be this chaotic event.
Yeah.
But that was really cool. Yeah, like.
And it was so simple. Like there was really not for us to during this really researchy demo-y time, we tried so many things and it was just amazing at how easy it was to do. Like we'd have little bugs, like when you picked up something and you were giant, your hand didn't hold it very well because it's a small object and you're a big person. But these little bugs absolutely did not hold us back from having a fantastic time and trying new things.
Yeah.
It's so phenomenally incredible how you could take a VR environment and turn it into a fun gameplay experience in 2 seconds, whereas with traditional games, a blank slate is actually so many more steps away from a enjoyable game, just because I guess you're creating your input from scratch for any other game, whereas for VR you've got this extremely detailed and complex input system out of the gate, really. So that's been amazing to work with, but has its own complications, because suddenly we're going, well, actually we, in a top-down game, you might optimize it by not having faces on the bottom of a table, or not, like, by doing things where you go, a player's never going to see this, so we can cut corners by stripping out those faces, or we don't need to handle what happens if a player picks up this bottle and shakes it, because they're never going to shake it, they can only pick it up. And so suddenly we're going, well, we gotta think about this, and we gotta think about that. So and that's been interesting. With our potion, we made it so you can shake it to pop the cork off, kind of like a champagne bottle, but you can also just pull it off. And we thought that's it's not necessary, but
we made a whole video about different ways to open a potion that I think was like really fun to make.
I think the one of the things we had in mind was like, obviously you have two-handed interactions, and opening a bottle is a two-handed interaction. But if you've got a sword in your hand, then you're like,
you could saber the cork off.
Oh no, I was gonna say you got to put down your sword, pop the thing, and like if you're just holding a flower, say, which you're not going to open a bottle with. If you're just holding a flower and a potion, you got to put the flower down, pop the cork, and then drink the potion and pick up the flower. Whereas if we add this shaking mechanic, suddenly you can use this potion one-handed, and it's a decision that we never would have had to make if it weren't VR. Like, it's just something you never would have thought of like this one-handed or two-handed interaction sort of aspect. So yeah, that's been.
There are some old games that tried out stuff like that. There's an really old PC game where some people call it kind of like a really old precursor to like a Dark Souls game, but all the mobs were physics based, and when you moved your mouse, it would kind of control like the arm swing. It was super janky, but like there was a time when a lot of games and like was it Surgeon Simulator and things like that tried out like these interactions, and then they started to capitalize on like the clunkiness to make it like comedic and fun. But with VR, like playing Surgeon Simulator, you're just being a surgeon. Like you see a difference in like the narrative type of YouTube content between those two, where it's like some people who play on PC are just kind of like this crazy horrible surgeon who just like smashes things with a hammer. But then with VR, you have people who could actually pretend to be like proper surgeons.
And I mean, obviously, that's been a huge thing in the training industry, is the fact that VR is actually quite intuitive. And obviously, Surgeon Simulator is not designed to be a realistic simulation experience, but it's amazing that VR has actually opened the possibility for someone who has zero experience with video games to intuitively learn a control system, because it's just like real life, and they can learn this control system in 2 seconds really. There's still the abstraction of the controller versus fingers, but even with stuff like the index or some of the glove technology people have been working on, even that sort of thing is more and more becoming less of a hindrance to that sort of thing.
All right. So we're gonna go to a Q&A session now. So I'm gonna sneeze again. I feel like we don't have a ton of time today, because we have another engagement coming up soon. So this will be a bit shorter. Sorry about people asking questions, but we'll try and get through a good amount of them today. All right. Be back in a moment. And welcome back, folks. We're gonna start the Q&A session. Yep. That's it.
I I haven't logged into my account, so it's
Okay.
not showing me the questions yet.
Okay, I'll start with one that looks. I can start with one. What do you think of having a desert area in the game with sand-based creatures or creature variations? So yep, like a sand area is pretty much a biome. The world that the Township Tale is built in is set in has a lot is going to have and has a lot of I guess diverse climates kind of a part of it, and part of it's because we're a video game, but also part of it is there is a concept of things kind of having come together to this area in the Township Tale. So that's like a sneak bit of understanding for the story of the game. Having so with that, sand-based creatures and creature variations is definitely a thing. I think one of the next things we're going to be tackling with creatures, however, is a more a general creature, something you can find a bit more spread out. We've been saying this a lot, but it always made sense for us to create the enemies we have so far based on the places we have. So Goteras, you'd expect to see in forest. You could maybe see Churabatas, I suppose, in the desert, but like we kind of wanted them for the caves and for our rocklands, and we wanted this melee fighter who wasn't like overly smart, like it wasn't a civilization-based creature. Worm is one of the first creatures we made, but so next up we will have something a bit more general.
Yeah. So this question is a bit of a technical question, but I guess why is it impossible to get under deep water, or to clip under structures to retrieve items? It's a kind of tricky question. Obviously, the reason this is being asked is because this person wants to access items that have been lost to these places, like have bugged under a building. The simple answer is it's unintentional for you to be able to go to these locations in the first place, and there's things, water specifically, in the long run, we actually do want you to be able to go there. We just don't have the swimming mechanic in yet. So there's some of these. I think water is a really odd one in the game right now because items can go in it, but you can't go in it. And I think at the end of the day, the short answer to that is just the fact that the game's still a work in progress. So there's going to be these odd things where there seems to be a lack of a mechanic, and that's literally just because we haven't had a chance to work on it yet. So, we're not doing house building questions.
No, we're not doing
again.
house building questions. No.
So, will armor crafting at some point make a comeback? So the blacksmiths would have a way to make coin.
Yep, armor will be coming back. It will come back when we have a greater combat challenge and a greater spectrum of combat things, so that weapon diversity and damage diversity that you can receive is greater. And yeah, there'll be nothing stopping you from selling armor after that.
Yeah. You can sell axes and swords and pickaxes in the meantime. So yeah. It's not completely impossible, but I get where this person's coming from. Like, it would be nice for these different professions to have more way to make the economy drive on. Okay. Will there eventually... this is the opposite of what everyone asks for. Will there eventually be a more in-depth graphic option for the PC version?
I mean, I think what they mean by in-depth is more graphic options, like for specific stuff.
Oh no, it is what most people ask for.
The answer for that is
more extreme, like graphics, but no.
The answer for that's yep, there will eventually be one, and there will be one once we're happy with what we consider the game, the default experience should be for like our default settings. Until we're like at a stage where we are happy with how optimized the game is, then we'll be supporting options around that, because what can otherwise tend to happen is if we support it out of the gate, then we tell people to lower their graphics, even if they are running something that's like even if they have a computer that is super powerful and should actually be able to run it. We don't want to be telling everybody to lower their graphics. Is essentially it.
Will Alchemy have plans to be able to pour potions over our weapons to buff them, infuse them, or add poison?
It's quite a specific interaction question. Alchemy will tie a role a bit into items. That is something that we've discussed. Whether it's pouring it, I know from a technical perspective we could probably do, but whether or not it's like the right mechanic that we want to do for it is a different matter.
Yeah, we've had a couple different ideas in this sort of vein. We talked a while back about the idea of doing something to your quiver, for instance, or a sheath, so that because right now there's no real reason to have sheaths in the game.
Yeah, I mean, sheath is quite a difficult topic to approach because of our weapon crafting.
Yeah, well, there's that, but I mean, like, in general, maybe it could be the case that you could make a quiver which has like a container at the bottom that you can fill with a poison, so all your arrows that go in there get poisoned too or something. So we'll definitely be keeping these sorts of ideas in mind, because like many things, as I said earlier, the more we can tie these different systems into each other, the more kind of all-encompassing and holistic the game will feel, rather than feeling like alchemy is its own little thing unrelated to everything. So
yeah.
Another magic-related question: what types of elemental magic will there be? Brackets: fire, wind, earth, water, etc. And will each element have its own training or experience?
How divided? I'm trying to think of how to phrase this in a.
It's another quite specific question. Is the problem? We've got documents going over kind of the law and the theory of magic, and some of these decisions aren't strictly, aren't restricted or held back by the law or general design, but might be things we need to explore and try out as we go. So, as a simple example, if we couldn't find a way to make water magic feel good in the game, we would rather focus on things that do feel good. We're not going to promise water magic and then, feel the need to push it out if it doesn't feel right. So there's some experimentation aspects there. And
magic is quite a custom thing to develop in games. There's obviously ways to kind of like, and it's very likely we're going to have quite a modular concept to magic in terms of how things combine. But at the end of the day, to make things really special and stand out, to make water considerably different to fire, that takes kind of like extra unique work. So that means that, and whether or not there's enough of a unique path for water to take from fire, that would warrant it having its own training or experience. But if we find that that's not the case, then it might be that the concept of the elements is kind of pulled together a bit more. It depends on how, like, essentially the more things can be combined. Like if the behavior of your magic spell is defined by something you've chosen, if like its range is like damage and all that stuff, and then eventually you add water to it, how that like reciprocates across all those things you've already chosen. Either it does or it doesn't. If it does, it's a lot of work. If it doesn't, then it's not that different from, it's just a different damage type to fire. So really quite a lot of parts to it that are quite complex and need to be properly balanced so that they feel like a fair distribution between the different elements?
I think it also depends on the scope of work that we put into it. So if we were to say let's make an elementalist class, if you will, that's very different to us saying let's work on elemental magic, where you end up with fire mages and water mages and air mages. They're two very different directions, and I think part of that will be something that will, in our early phase of magic R&D, explore a little bit of both on and work out exactly where on that spectrum we wanna sit. Okay, exploration question. There are 2 exit paths far in the forest. This is correct. Are they going to lead somewhere?
Yep.
Okay. Do we want to say anything, or we just?
So like part of the forest technology allows for these kinds of entrances and exits. John and I have always talked about like you having to go through the forest to end up somewhere, and part of the procedural and that be somewhere kind of static, similar to how when you enter the town you always enter through the same way. We're able to choose, like, so we're able to have, like, we could say that there's 12 possible points in which the forest can have an exit, and maybe on 4 of those points there's a chance that one of those points will spawn like this particular or
What do you say?
no yeah sorry, like there's both like a procedural element to those points that we can use, and then there's also like a static point is what I was trying to get to.
The cool kind of things that we can do is it allows us to add a twist to the experience. I guess hypothetically, let's say we moved the climbing tower to be at the top of the forest, then the experience of going to that tower would suddenly be different from server to server, and you wouldn't be able to join a new server and just beeline straight for that, because you'd need to work out your way through the forest. But to mix it up even, let's say we had a hollow, a lion's den sort of thing, which was at one of the exits. As Boramy was saying, we could actually change which exit that's at, or mix it up, or move that exit a little bit. And so at this stage, we're not going to tell you what's going to be out either of those exits. There is a chance they might move, or new exits will form. But yes, there definitely will be stuff there. And the reason we have exits there is precisely for this reason, to suggest that there's more to come. We could have simply deleted those so that all forests generated without any exits except for the main entrance. But we thought, wouldn't it be cool just to have them duck out into this blank field, so at least people can see that, you know, this is where more things will be in the future.
Yep.
Yes. Feel like I answered that one, and I answered that one.
Okay. Yep. We're almost out of time, so you pick a last question, and then I'm gonna answer another one whilst you're doing that.
Okay.
Okay. A lot of these are housing questions. Okay. This one's kind of housing related. Oh man, actually there are a lot of housing questions.
I've got a question which is just armor.
Yeah.
Okay,
dynamics. I guess I'll answer dynamic skybox. Dynamic skybox. I want to be able to just watch the sky and the stars glide by, maybe some clouds forming in and out of existence. So I've done some experiments on. A part of that ties a bit into, like, we're not doing any work on it because we know a lot of it's going to be impacted by whatever weather system we get to when we get to it. So right now that's kind of like on this static hiatus. In terms of what, like, there's a lot of aspirational ideas that we have about what the skybox can mean for the game, particularly when it relates to like stars and clouds. We've looked into, or I've looked into like volumetric cloud formations, which are like very costly. They're just like a pipe dream for the most part. But they look kind of cool. But like yeah, like it's just never gonna run well. When it comes to stars and things like that, it's something that we could quite easily kind of pan them at best, to make the Earth look like it rotates. But again, it's quite low priority, and I think eventually we might, or at least I'm kind of curious into incorporating some gameplay components to the skybox. I suppose is where I want to leave it to.
There's a lot we can do with the skybox. It's worth noting, Victor, who is now very, very good at shaders, started pretty much one of the first things he did was work on this skybox, and I'm sure if we gave him the opportunity to remake it from scratch, he would have like a million ideas of what to do. But dynamic skyboxes are quite a task to add in lots of elements and still make them perform well, because ultimately you're rendering your entire vision worth this. So if each pixel is a complicated calculation, it can be quite taxing on performance. So I definitely think we'll do a lot more. I know Serena's commented on wanting to upgrade the clouds at some point, doing those sorts of things, but I think weather and seasons are going to be pretty big, in terms of trying to change the atmospheric mood when we get to that point. But also I think even just new environments. Something that we don't do right now, but I would like to explore, is subtly changing your vision in different locations to give different vibes. Maybe not so much that you even notice it necessarily, but maybe it gives you puts you on edge or something. Or if you're going into this desert that was asked about earlier, maybe your vision becomes a bit more reddish and lower saturation, and you get this dry, harsh vibe going along, and along with the howling wind or whatever, really brings you into the mood.
Yeah, you can see the heat waves over the sand dunes.
Yeah, so I 100% would love to see a lot more.
Like we do a little bit of that. Like obviously when you go into the caves, like everything goes black. When you go into the forest, the fog is a bit thicker. But we want to kind of expand that in. That is like all this atmospheric stuff is kind of put into that weather box, because it's similar to audio engine wise. We don't want to redo work later.
Yeah.
All right.
I've got a question. It's a bit of a different one. The reason I'm choosing to finish on this one, it's not the most exciting. I actually think if we wanted the most exciting, we'd finish now. But we do actually want feedback on this one. So the question is, when will the store rotation get an upgrade, like from 2 sets and 4 pieces to 3 sets and 6 pieces? And then currently, this is what they're saying, I'll take their word for it. Currently, there are 51 sets, 14 bundles, and 98 pieces. So there you go. To answer the question, this is something that we are having and will continue to have discussions about as a company. We want to try and find a balance that will help people get the outfits that they want, but also kind of respect you guys as users. We don't want to, we don't want to do anything that's going to result in, rotating the store every hour, and then suddenly you're having to check every hour to see if the outfit you want is out. We don't want to do stuff like that. So I don't have an answer to the question, but I would love to ask you guys as a community, do you have any thoughts about, you know, how you would want the store to change? Any changes in general to do with that?
Something about
or...
something about the store that we started to experiment with a bit more, especially since it's our second year doing stores, I think.
I don't know, but sure.
Or I guess maybe our third, but we're reaching the point where for a lot of seasonal stuff now we're bringing back all the old stuff that we made, like some of the outfits that we made for those times, but then there's some new ones being added. So we're at this point where like within the seasonal 1 month period of that holiday, for example, we have more outfits and parts that we can fit. So we started to expand on those. So you can expect seasonal rotations to have more. And that's something that we and now we're starting to like Joel recently provided quite a useful tool to some of the to the cosmetics team that lets them see like how long ago, or like see very clearly, because you could find out before and the data was there, but which outfits and sets
haven't been there for a long time.
Haven't been there for a long time, and that's kind of gonna help us control what comes back.
Hopefully a bit more like obviously each set is kind of themed a little bit, and each store rotation is themed a little bit, and we try a lot to listen to the community with particular things people want to see back, and make sure that, you know, a store rotation doesn't just have 6 hairstyles or 6 shirts in it. We try and make sure that with any one store rotation you could kind of piece together a wide variety of outfits. But yeah, we're trying to think of and develop more ways to make sure that we are getting things rotating through the store, so that people aren't waiting forever. And it hurts me deep when people are like, oh, I just missed the last rotation and it had the thing I've been waiting for ages. So maybe if we could maybe coming up with ideas like alert systems, so you can like say I want this and get an alert when it comes back in the store or something
like a wish list and stuff like that.
We'd love to hear. So
another quick, I guess, to end things on this, because we're about to wrap up. One other thing that I'm really looking forward to with the store is the inclusion of some new cosmetic type stuff, particularly something that we've had as an idea and we've done minor work on it ages ago when the store came out, is the sash modification. So every character, they've got their belt and they've got their sash. The sash has always been a part that people haven't been able to change, but that's something that we'd like to do. And that's going to feature quite an exciting configuration process, because we kind of see it as the symbol of you and your creed and your clan or your group.
Yeah, you and your friends could all get the same one, so you can show off your clan.
So there's going to be really cool components to that, and it will very likely tie into things like banners and carpets and stuff that you can make. So it'll be maybe the first time that we'll have a cosmetic that can be used and applied to this kind of like cosmetic in-game item.
An in-game cosmetic,
yeah. All right, and that's it for this Altacast. Thanks everybody so much for watching. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the Q&A link below. If you have a housing question that you have and you want to ask, be sure to check the previous Altacasts, particularly the housing related ones. Some of the questions that I have seen on here I know have been answered, so be sure to check on them.
Yeah, and if you have any thoughts about VR development or anything else we've talked about, feel free to hit us up in the comments. We do read them, so we'll try and reply if people have any comments or questions. And, like and subscribe and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We have Instagram.
We do have an Instagram. Actually, I need to I'll need to start posting stuff on there because Tim has been hounding me about it.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Bye, everybody.